Crash. My windshield exploded right outside my house. Some guy in a cheap uniform reading community safety unit wearing a plastic emergency compliance badge, bringing a club down on my freshly washed car, yelled that I was violating emergency safety codes. The problem is don't have emergency powers. And yet here I was, glass all over my driveway, neighbors peeking through their curtains, and a stranger acting like he owned my property. For a second I froze, torn between disbelief and fury, because none of this made sense. Tell me in the comments what would have been running through your mind if it happened to you. It was one of those perfect Sunday mornings where everything felt right with the world. I'd spent 20 minutes washing my car in the driveway, enjoying the quiet neighborhood sounds and the way the sun hit the hood just right after waxing. The coffee was still warm in my travel mug, sitting on the porch railing, and I was thinking about maybe grilling burgers later if the weather held up like this. My garage door was open behind me, showing off the organized workspace I'd spent weeks perfecting. Every tool in its designated place, workbench cleared and clean, even swept the concrete floor yesterday evening. It's funny how these peaceful moments have a way of making you completely vulnerable. Like the universe is setting you up for something you never see coming until it's too late. The sound came first, not a car door slamming or someone dropping something heavy, but this sharp metallic crack that made my spine straighten before my brain could process what was actually happening. I turned around just in time to see this. Guy in some kind of uniform, bringing what looked like a police baton down on my windshield with both hands raised above his head. Glass exploded everywhere, covering my driveway like 1,000 tiny diamonds. Some pieces hitting my legs and arms with these little stings that felt completely surreal. My first thought wasn't anger or fear. It was pure confusion because this made absolutely no sense whatsoever in any universe I understood. Who destroys someone's car on a Sunday morning in broad daylight with neighbors potentially watching from their kitchen windows? The guy stepped back from my destroyed windshield, and that's when I got my first good look at him. Mid-4? South maybe? Wearing what appeared to be some kind of security uniform that looked like it came from a discount costume shop rather than any legitimate department or agency. The shirt had community safety unit printed across the back in fading block letters. And he wore this plastic badge on his chest that said emergency compliance in gold lettering that was already starting to peel around the edges. Everything about his appearance screamed amateur hour. From the way his utility belt didn't quite fit properly to the fact that his black boots were clearly borrowed from someone with bigger feet. But the baton in his hand was real enough. And so was the spiderweb of cracks spreading across my windshield where he'd struck it. "Sir, you are in violation of emergency safety compliance codes," he shouted, pointing the baton at me like I was supposed to drop to my knees and surrender immediately. His voice cracked slightly on the word emergency, which might have been funny. Under completely different circumstances. This property has been flagged for immediate assessment, and your vehicle presents a fire hazard blocking emergency access routes. I looked around my own driveway, trying to figure out what fire hazard he was talking about, since my car was parked exactly where it always was, and there were no emergency access routes anywhere near my residential property. The whole street was normal suburban housing, with regular driveways and standard spacing between houses. Nothing that looked remotely like any kind of emergency situation requiring immediate intervention. That's when my brain finally started working again. And I realized I needed to document everything happening right now before it got worse. I pulled out my phone and started recording, which immediately changed Hai's entire demeanor from confident authority figure to nervous amateur who clearly hadn't expected this level of pushback. "Stop recording immediately. This is an official safety assessment, and documentation is strictly prohibited during active compliance reviews," he yelled. But his voice got higher and shakier with each word that came out of his mouth. I kept the camera rolling and said the first logical thing that came to mind. "Show me your badge and official identification right now." As he fumbled around his uniform for several seconds before producing what looked like a laminated business card with his photo on it. But when I zoomed in with my camera, the text was blurry and the municipal seal looked completely wrong. During his fumbling routine, something fell from his pocket onto my concrete driveway with a soft thud. At first I thought it might be keys or loose change, but when I looked closer, while keeping my phone camera focused on him, was a brown leather wallet that had opened when it hit the ground. I could see business cards sticking out at odd angles, along with what looked like handwritten notes or lists written on folded papers. While he was still waving his fake badge around and shouting about compliance violations and emergency powers, I casually stepped over and picked up his wallet before he noticed it was missing from his pocket. The business cards inside said Compliance Solutions LLC, with his name printed clearly, Travis Doyle. And underneath that, handwritten dollar amounts and what looked like weekly quota targets with dates and neighborhoods listed, looking through his wallet contents while he continued his performance. I found notes about commission structures and quota requirements that didn't sound like anything any legitimate safety inspector would carry around in their personal effects. There were also printed sheets with addresses from our neighborhood and others nearby, complete with property values and estimated compliance fees written in red ink. Your badge shows Henderson County seal, but we're in Franklin County, I told him, still recording with one hand while examining his documentation with the other. And according to state regulations, HOAs don't have emergency powers to damage private property without proper legal authorization. His face went from angry red to worried pale in about 2 seconds flat, which told me everything I needed to know about how well he actually understood legitimate regulations. He started backing toward a beat-up sedan parked crookedly on the street, probably realizing that whatever authority he thought he possessed was evaporating faster than he could maintain his act. But then he stopped walking and looked at my phone again with this calculating expression that made my stomach drop, because I suddenly understood that recording him might not have been the protection I thought it was. Something in his posture shifted from defensive retreat to offensive planning, and I caught him glancing at my garage door, which was still wide open, showing all my tools and equipment. That's when I noticed something I'd missed before. Scratch marks around the housing of my garage fire alarm system, like someone had been tampering with it recently with metal tools. The scratches were bright silver against the white plastic. It's definitely new, and definitely not something I would have done myself. The way he looked at my phone made me realize recording him might have been a mistake. I was standing in my driveway, holding this stranger's wallet, filming him with my phone, surrounded by broken glass from my own windshield, trying to figure out if I was in actual physical danger or just dealing with the world's most incompetent scam artist. Travis Doyle, now that I knew his real name from his business cards, was staring at my phone like it contained footage of him committing murder instead of just video proof of him destroying my property on a quiet Sunday morning. The whole situation felt like some kind of bizarre fever dream where normal neighborhood rules didn't apply anymore and anything could happen next. 30 minutes ago? My biggest concern was whether to use the garden hose or just let the car air dry naturally. And now I was holding materials that looked like organized fraud while some fake official figured out his next tactical move. That's when I heard the familiar sound of Claire Benton's screen door slamming across the street, followed by her deliberate footsteps on the sidewalk as she approached our little drama with a steaming coffee mug in one hand and what appeared to be a thick manila folder in the other. Claire was one of those neighbors you were always grateful to have around. Retired corporate lawyer, sharp as any knife you've ever seen. It's the kind of person who actually reads bylaws and municipal codes for entertainment and remembers every single detail months later when you need them most. She'd lived on our street longer than anyone else and had developed this uncanny ability to appear whenever something legally interesting was happening. Lex had some kind of neighborhood litigation radar permanently installed in her brain. Instead of addressing Travis directly or asking what was obviously going on, Claire walked straight to the middle of the street and turned to face the small crowd that had started gathering on porches and front lawns without me even noticing. Apparently, the sound of exploding glass followed by aggressive shouting had attracted curious attention from at least 5 different houses, with people emerging in bathrobes and coffee cups too. See what kind of excitement was disrupting their peaceful Sunday morning routine? "Good morning, everyone," Claire called out in her practiced courtroom voice, projecting just enough volume to reach every neighbor without seeming like she was making some kind of dramatic speech. "Has anyone here seen this gentleman's official city identification or written verification of his claimed enforcement powers? The way she phrased the question made it abundantly clear she already knew thens were, but wanted everyone else to hear. Travis's attempt to explain himself in front of multiple witnesses. Travis looked around at the growing audience with increasing nervousness, and I could practically see him calculating whether to double down on his authority performance or try to retreat gracefully before things got completely out of hand. Unfortunately for everyone involved, he chose the doubling down option. "Ma'am, this is an active safety assessment, and civilian interference is strictly prohibited under municipal emergency codes," he announced loudly, pulling out his fake badge. Again, and waving it around like it was going to convince anyone who looked at it closely. Claire adjusted her reading glasses with deliberate precision and walked closer to examine his credentials, which made him hold the badge higher and stand straighter, probably thinking he was successfully intimidating a harmless old lady. I almost felt sorry for him because he clearly had absolutely no idea what he was dealing with when it came to Claire Benton and her extensive legal background. "How interesting," Claire said after studying his badge for exactly 10 seconds with the focused attention of someone who'd spent decades reviewing fraudulent documents in corporate litigation. "This appears to display a seal that doesn't match any valid municipal office. Also, the statute you're citing was struck down after constitutional challenges years ago." She opened her manila folder with practiced efficiency and pulled out what looked like printed pages covered with yellow highlighter marks and detailed legal citations written in her neat handwriting. "I've been tracking similar incidents in surrounding neighborhoods for the past several months. Your documentation patterns are remarkably consistent across different locations." The way she delivered this information made it sound like she was complimenting him on his organizational skills, but her tone clearly suggested she was building a comprehensive legal case in him in real time. Travis's confident posture started visibly cracking as Claire continued her impromptu legal education seminar for our growing crowd of interested neighbors. F's authority for private contractors requires active state certification, formal municipal approval, and mandatory 72-hour advanced written notice to all affected property owners. Additionally, any legitimate emergency action must be preceded by documented safety hazards, verified by licensed municipal inspectors, and filed with appropriate oversight agencies. She held up additional papers from her folder, and I could see they were photocopies of official forms, state regulations, and what looked like correspondence with various government offices. None of these legal requirements appear to have been properly met in this particular situation. The neighbors were starting to murmur among themselves with increasing concern, and I distinctly heard someone mention receiving similar threatening notices about supposed safety violations in recent weeks. That revelation hit me like cold water, because it meant this wasn't specifically about my car or my property at all. Claire's folder was far too organized, too comprehensive, too professionally prepared for this to be some kind of fortunate coincidence. She'd been actively expecting something exactly like this to happen. Maybe not today, and certainly not necessarily to me, but she'd been preparing for Travis, or someone very much like him, to show up in our neighborhood and start making these bogus claims about manufactured enforcement and safety violations. The realization made me look around at my neighbors with completely different eyes, wondering how many of them had already received threatening official-looking notices, or felt pressure about engineered compliance issues they didn't understand. Mrs. Patterson received one of those notices last Tuesday, called out Jim from 2 houses down, holding up his own coffee mug like he was making a toast to shared misery. Something above their fence violating some emergency access code she'd never heard of before. Several other neighbors nodded in recognition. I heard multiple people mentioning similar experiences with official-looking paperwork, demanding immediate attention to safety issues that seemed to come out of nowhere. Claire was taking notes in her folder while people shared their stories, building what looked like a comprehensive case file right there in the middle of our suburban street on a Sunday morning. Travis backed toward his beat-up sedan again, but this time he was making urgent phone calls instead of simply retreating from the scene. I could hear him saying things like, "We have a serious situation developing here, and need administrative backup immediately, possibly legal intervention," which sounded official enough to be genuinely concerning rather than just annoying. Claire caught my eye and nodded meaningfully toward his vehicle, where I could clearly see papers scattered across the dashboard and what appeared to be a laptop computer running some kind of program in the passenger seat. "Daniel," she said, using my first name, even though I had never formally introduced myself to her. "I think you and I need to have a detailed conversation about what's been occurring in this neighborhood over the past few months." The way she delivered that statement suggested she possessed information that was going to fundamentally change everything. I thought I understood about this entire situation. Claire's folder was thicker-thon. It should have been for a coincidental collection. About 15 minutes after Travis made his frantic phone calls, I spotted the police cruiser turning onto our street with its emergency lights flashing but no siren. That deliberate, professional approach that tells you someone called in something serious but not immediately life-threatening. Officer Grant Miller stepped out of his patrol car with the kind of calm authority that immediately changed the entire energy of our impromptu neighborhood, gathering from curious drama to official business. He was maybe late 30s, average height, but solid build, wearing his uniform like someone who'd been doing this job long enough to handle pretty much any situation. Without getting rattled, the way he surveyed the scene before approaching anyone told me he was the type of cop who gathered information first and made judgment second, which felt like exactly what this bizarre situation needed right now. Miller walked directly to Travis first, which made sense since he was the one standing next to a car with a destroyed windshield holding what appeared to be some kind of official-looking badge. "Sir, I understand there's been an incident involving property damage and disputed authority claims," Miller said in that neutral police tone. "That doesn't reveal whether you're in trouble or not. I'm going to need to see your official identification and any documentation supporting your enforcement powers." Travis immediately produced his plastic badge and laminated IDD card with obvious confidence, probably thinking a real police officer would automatically accept whatever credentials he presented. Miller took one look at the badge and his expression shifted from professionally neutral to professionally skeptical in a way that suggested he'd seen plenty of fake authority figures before. The holographic security features appear printed rather than embedded, and several words are misspelled, Miller observed, holding the plastic badge up to catch the morning sunlight and examining it from multiple angles. He flipped the badge over and studied the back, which was apparently blank when it should have contained additional verification information and security markings. "I'm going to run a verification check on your acclaimed organization." Miller walked back to his patrol car, and I could hear him speaking into his radio, requesting dispatch to confirm the existence of something called Community Safety Unit, along with Travis's supposed authorization to operate in this area, while Miller conducted his radio verification. Travis's confident demeanor began cracking like ice under pressure. He kept glancing between the police officer and his beat-up sedan, probably calculating whether he could make it to his car and drive away before Miller finished his investigation. The neighbors had formed a loose semicircle around the scene, maintaining respectful distance, but clearly invested in seeing how this official intervention would resolve our morning drama. Claire stood closest to Miller's car, still holding her manila folder and occasionally making notes, looking like she was documenting everything for future legal reference. I remained near my destroyed windshield, still holding Travis's wallet with all those suspicious business cards and quota sheets that were starting to feel like crucial ammunition. Miller returned from his radio check with an expression that told the whole story before he said a word. "Dispatch confirms there is no such unit operating anywhere nearby. Your supposed regulations don't even exist in current law," he announced loud enough for everyone to hear. Additionally, the state licensing board has no record of emergency contractors authorized to conduct assessments or damage private vehicles. Travis's face went completely pale as Miller continued his findings. Gasps rippled through the crowd as neighbors realized they had been witnessing actual criminal activity rather than some kind of legitimate municipal procedure. Everything about Travis's the official story was falling apart in real time, and he knew it. "Sir, I'm placing you under arrest for criminal mischief, impersonating a public official, and destruction of private assets," Miller stated while pulling out his handcuffs. Travis finally panicked and tried to run toward his car, but Miller caught him before he made it halfway across the street. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Miller forced Travis down against the hood of his sedan. The physical struggle drawing shocked reactions from neighbors who probably hadn't expected to witness an actual arrest on their quiet suburban street. During the brief confrontation, several papers fell out of Travis's pockets, which I quickly gathered up while Miller was securing the handcuffs and reading Travis's rights. The papers included what looked like printed email instructions about weekly quota targets and commission structures for fee collection, along with a list of addresses in our neighborhood with dollar amounts written next to each residence. Sheet specifically mentioned my address with a note about garage access points and fire safety manipulation opportunities, suggesting they had been planning to target my property specifically rather than conducting random harassment activities. Miller took possession of all the papers and Travis's fake badge as official materials, but he also made copies of everything on his phone camera, including the contents of Travis's wallet that I'd been holding during the entire confrontation. "Mr. Harris, I'm going to need your phone footage as formal documentation. I'll also need a complete statement about the damage and any threats you received," Miller explained while loading Travis into the back of his patrol car. The whole arrest process felt surprisingly anticlimactic after all the shouting and drama. But seeing Travis in handcuffs gave me a satisfaction I wasn't expecting after the morning's chaos. Still, something about Miller's expression when Hare reviewed those quota sheets suggested this incident was connected to something much larger than one fake official, targeting random homeowners for personal profit. The systematic nature of the documentation and the professional quality of the fraudulent materials indicated a serious organization behind what had initially looked like amateur criminal behavior. As Miller prepared to drive away with his suspect, he handed me his business card and said something that made my stomach drop with sudden realization. "Mr. Harris, based on these documents and the coordinated nature of this operation, you should expect contact from investigators within the next few days." Federal investigators. I looked around at my neighbors, who were all staring at Miller with the same confused expression I probably had. This appears to be part of an organized scheme targeting multiple communities in interstate. Fraud falls under different jurisdiction. He paused before getting into his car and added, "I'd recommend documenting any additional suspicious activity and keeping all materials secure until the team arrives." Officer Miller's expression when he read those quota sheets told me this was about to get federal. The federal implications of Miller's warning were still bouncing around in my head when I noticed the black SUV turning onto our street about an hour after the police cruiser had disappeared with Travis in custody. This wasn't some neighbor returning from grocery shopping or a delivery truck making Sunday rounds. This was a deliberately intimidating vehicle with tinted window sand, the kind of pristine exterior that suggested serious money behind whatever organization owned it. The SUV parked directly across from my house, positioning itself where everyone in the neighborhood could see it clearly. And 3 people in business attire climbed out like they were arriving for some kind of corporate board meeting rather than addressing a residential street disturbance. The woman leading the group was probably early 50s. Wearing a sharp gray business suit that looked expensive enough to cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. Her blonde hair was styled in that aggressive professional way that suggested she spent significant time in boardrooms winning arguments. And she carried herself with the kind of confident authority that came from years of getting exactly what she wanted through sheer force of personality. She was followed by 2 men in similar business attire, both carrying leather portfolios and looking like they'd stepped directly out of a corporate law firm. Rather Thinoni kind of community management organization. Everything about their appearance screamed serious business, which made their presence on our suburban street feel both impressive and vaguely threatening at the same time. Instead of approaching me privately for a quiet conversation, the lead woman walked to the middle of the street and began setting up what appeared to be a public announcement station, complete with portable speakers and a professional camera that one of the men assembled with practiced efficiency. "Attention residents of Maple Grove Drive," she announced through a wireless microphone that projected her voice across the entire neighborhood, drawing people from their houses like some kind of community emergency was unfolding. "I am Marcia Reed, president of the Sunset Hills Community Standards Board, and we are conducting an emergency community safety broadcast regarding this morning's compliance incident." She gestured toward my destroyed windshield like it proved some kind of point about neighborhood decay rather than criminal behavior by someone currently in police custody. Neighbors began emerging from their houses as Marcia's amplified voice reached every corner of our street, creating a much larger crowd than our morning drama had attracted initially. This community has been flagged for comprehensive safety evaluation following law enforcement intervention and subsequent compliance violations. She continued, while the cameramen filmed everything for what appeared to be their own documentary or promotional purposes. We are authorized to conduct immediate assessments and implement corrective measures to ensure neighborhood safety and protect community asset values from further deterioration. The whole performance felt like elaborate theater designed to overwhelm everyone with professional authority and bureaucratic complexity before we could figure out what was actually happening. Jim, from 2 houses down, stepped forward with obvious frustration, building in his voice and body language. "Lady, we don't know who you are or what authority you think you have to set up speakers in our street." Several neighbors nodded in agreement and started shouting questions about her credentials and legal authorization to conduct any kind of community assessment or broadcast. Mrs. Patterson waved her own compliance notice from last week, demanding explanations about violations she'd never heard of before. Today, the crowd was getting more agitated as people realized this wasn't some helpful community service announcement, but another layer of the same harassment that had been building systematically for weeks. That's when Marca made her first major, tactical mistake. Instead of maintaining her professional composure under mounting pressure from multiple residents, she let her true agenda slip through in front of witnesses with cameras running. If residents continue to resist legitimate compliance processes and involve outside law enforcement agencies, we will be forced to recommend utility service suspensions and aggressive municipal code enforcement actions, she threatened while pointing directly at me and several vocal neighbors who were asking uncomfortable questions. The next 48 hours will determine whether this community can be brought into voluntary compliance or requires more intensive intervention measures to protect surrounding property values. The way she delivered that ultimatum made it crystal clear. This wasn't about safety. It was about control and financial extraction through systematic intimidation. The cameraman continued filming while neighbors shouted back at Marcia's threats, creating chaotic scenes that probably weren't part of their planned professional documentation strategy. Claire appeared at my elbow and whispered, "She just threatened municipal services in front of multiple witnesses, textbook extortion under state law." I pulled out my phone and started recording Marcia's increasingly agitated responses to neighborhood pushback, capturing her admitting that compliance fees were necessary for maintaining community standards and that families who couldn't afford improvements should consider relocation to areas more suited to their current financial capabilities. Every word she spoke was digging her organization deeper into legal territory that would be difficult to defend later. While Marcia continued her public meltdown disguised as a community meeting, I noticed one of her associates systematically placing laminated notices on garage doors throughout the street. With military precision and timing, each notice contained a QR code that apparently linked to additional information about supposed violations, creating a coordinated multimedia campaign targeting every household simultaneously. The level of organization was impressive and disturbing. Within minutes of their arrival, every homeowner in our area was being contacted through multiple channels about urgent safety problems that required immediate professional attention and financial investment. Scanning the QR code on my phone evolved a sophisticated website called Community Compliance. It's a database that looked completely legitimate until you realized it had been created specifically to manufacture problems where none existed previously. The site already listed my address, along with detailed photos of my property and comprehensive violation reports I'd never heard of before. Nearly every house in our neighborhood was included, along with dozens of properties from surrounding areas, each with detailed compliance assessments and recommended corrective actions. The website even included search functions and historical records, suggesting months of advanced preparation rather than reactive safety assessment. The website registration date told me they had been planning this neighborhood for months. 11:30 that night. I was deep into what felt like the most important research project of my life, surrounded by printed emails, website screenshots, and domain registration searches scattered across my home office desk like clues in a detective movie. My laptop screen glowed in the dark room while I cross-referenced property records, municipal databases, and corporate filings, trying to piece together the full scope of what Marsh's organization had been doing to neighborhoods across our region. The house was completely quiet, except for the steady clicking of keyboard keys and my printer running continuously as I documented everything I could find. Every new piece of information I uncovered made the situation feel bigger and more coordinated than I'd imagined. Travis first smashed my windshield this morning. Around midnight, I noticed a sedan parked across the street that hadn't been there when I started my research session. The car was positioned where someone inside could see directly into my home office window. Occasionally, I caught glimpses of movement inside when street light hit the windshield at the right angle. My printer suddenly stopped working halfway. Through printing a crucial document about corporate filings, which could have been coincidence, but felt suspiciously timed given everything that had been happening. When I got up to check the machine and look out my window more carefully, I could definitely see someone sitting in that parked car, probably monitoring my activities and taking notes about my research progress. Every flicker of movement in the car outside felt like a warning that I wasn't just dealing with paperwork anymore. The breakthrough came when I started analyzing the community standards database website that Marsh's team had directed me to. Earlier today, using basic web investigation techniques I'd learned during warehouse management training, discovered the domain had been registered 18 months ago under a corporate entity called Neighborhood Enhancement Solutions. Cross-referencing that company name through state business records revealed a network of related organizations operating across 7 different states' counties, all with similar names and identical business models focused on extracting money through engineered safety emergencies. Each page read like a dossier of fake hazards, carefully designed to look official while targeting families with manufactured crises. My lights flickered twice while I was downloading archived versions of websites they'd created for other targeted areas, each following the exact same template and process that we'd experienced today. Could have been electrical issues, but combined with the surveillance car outside and my printer mysteriously malfunctioning, it felt like deliberate intimidation tactics designed to make me stop digging into their operation. Each archived site showed an identical pattern. Homes flagged for phantom violations. Residents receiving official-looking notices demanding immediate assessments. Then expensive consulting services offered to resolve the created problems quickly. Individual households had paid anywhere from $3,000 to $15,000 to make the harassment stop and avoid potential legal complications with local authorities. Database searches revealed that Marsh's group had methodically targeted at least 12 different neighborhoods over the past 18 months, generating an average of $47,000 in collected fees per community before moving on to fresh targets and starting the cycle over again. Each operation followed identical timelines lasting approximately 6 to 8 weeks, starting with individual home targeting and escalating to comprehensive neighborhood-wide campaigns that exhausted residents financially and emotionally. Reading through victim testimonials on consumer complaint websites reminded me of my father's warnings about door-to-door scams when I was growing up. Except this was government impersonation targeting families with fake authority and manufactured emergencies designed to extract maximum profit. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, I heard soft tapping sounds against my office window that made me freeze completely at my keyboard. When I looked up from my laptop screen, I could see a figure standing in my seed yard just outside the security light range, apparently trying to get my attention without alerting neighbors to their presence. The tapping continued for about 30 seconds before stopping abruptly. It's followed by footsteps moving around the perimeter of my house in a deliberate pattern. I grabbed a flashlight and my phone, but by the time I reached the window to investigate, whoever had been there was gone. The psychological effect was exactly what they'd intended. I felt watched, vulnerable, and increasingly paranoid about continuing my research into their criminal organization. The most disturbing discovery came when I searched the historical documents that these fake violations were supposedly based on, according to their professional look notices. Municipal records showed that legitimate safety inspections had been conducted on most targeted homes years ago by licensed inspectors, with all requirements met and proper certificates issued by appropriate authorities, but the current violation notices were claiming that the same residences now failed to meet standards that had been satisfied previously, suggesting someone was deliberately manufacturing problems where none existed. Cross-referencing the inspector, signatures on original certificates revealed a troubling pattern that made my stomach drop. Walter Briggs's name appeared on dozens of homes across all the targeted neighborhoods throughout the region. Around 2 in the morning, Claire arrived with coffee and her manila folder. Looking like someone who'd been conducting parallel research while I was working alone. "Found anything interesting?" she asked while settling into my living room chair and spreading documents across my coffee table that looked remarkably similar to my own findings. Her legal research had uncovered the real endgame of this operation. Families exhausted by months of harassment were selling their homes at below-market prices and moving away. Many of those properties subsequently purchased by investment companies. Connected to the same corporate network, it's coordinated community destabilization designed to generate multiple revenue streams from forced federal estate turnover, she explained, while showing me property transfer records that revealed the financial scope. Anyone else dealing with suspicious HOA harassment should start documenting everything immediately. Photos, recordings, and copies of all paperwork. The patterns are easier to spot than you'd think. The human cost was what really affected me. Emotionally, as I read through complaint forms and legal aid websites, families describing years of harassment, children developing anxiety about coming home from school, elderly residents selling houses they'd lived in for decades, just to escape constant pressure and threats from people pretending to represent community interests. Some people had paid thousands of dollars they couldn't afford, going into debt to satisfy manufactured requirements, only to receive new violation notices weeks later demanding additional expensive improvements. Others had fought back through legal channels, but given up after months of attorney fees in court, appearances designed to exhaust their resources rather than resolve disputes. Just as Claire and I finished assembling our comprehensive case file, my phone buzzed with an anonymous text message that made my blood run cold in the quiet darkness. "Stop now or next time it won't be glass you're cleaning up," it read, sent from an unknown number at 2:45 in the morning while we were still sitting in my living room reviewing documents. Looking out my window, the surveillance car was gone, but the threat was unmistakably clear. Summy and I had been monitoring my research activities throughout the night and was prepared to escalate beyond property damage. If I continued investigating their operation, the message proved we were definitely on the right track, but it also meant the stakes were about to increase dramatically for everyone involved. Walter Briggs's phone number was in the city directory, but calling him would change everything. Meeting Walter Briggs face-to-face turned out to be easier than I'd expected, but more emotionally complicated than I was prepared for. He agreed to meet me at Rosie's Diner on Tuesday morning. It's one of those classic small-town breakfast places, where the coffee is strong and the boots let you see everything without anyone overhearing. Walter looked like a retired municipal inspector. Late 60s gray hair, flannel shirt, and work boots that had seen better decades. But there was something in his eyes that looked like he'd been carrying heavy guilt, waiting for someone to finally ask him the right questions. He was already sitting in the corner booth when I arrived, nursing a cup of coffee and staring out of the window with the kind of distant expression that suggested years of regret about decisions he'd made or avoided making. "That's one of the boys who's been using my name on paperwork I never signed," he said without any preliminary small talk, nodding toward the parking lot where Travis's sedan was positioned for surveillance. "Been wondering when someone would finally track me down Tosk about all the forged inspection reports floating around with my signature." His hands trembled as he slid a manila envelope across the table, and I could tell this conversation was going to reveal things he'd been avoiding for years. Walter's confession started slowly, but gained emotional weight as he described losing 3 close friends. 20 years ago, when he refused to sign off on questionable HOA modification requests that didn't meet safety standards. "I took a stand back then, cost my relationships, and nearly cost me my job," So when Marcia approached me about consulting work 5 years ago, I was tempted by the easy money, he admitted while pulling photocopied documents from his envelope. They offered substantial payment to rubber stamp their compliance assessments, and I came close to accepting before my conscience kicked in and reminded me why I'd fought HOA corruption before. The shame in his voice was obvious. He described how fear of financial pressure had almost turned him into the kind of inspector had spent decades fighting against, but I backed out at the last minute and took early retirement instead. Thinking that would end my involvement, Walter continued, showing me original inspection files that proved homes currently being targeted had passed legitimate safety evaluations. Years earlier, what I didn't realize was that they had already copied my signature and certification stamps during our preliminary meetings, giving them everything. They needed to forge new reports without my knowledge or consent. The documentation he provided was devastating proof that his legitimate past work was being weaponized to create fraudulent current problems, turning his professional reputation into a tool for systematic neighborhood harassment. That's exactly when our quiet conversation got dramatically interrupted by Travis Doyle walking straight into the diner and approaching our booth like he owned the place. He slid into the seat next to Walter without invitation, effectively blocking any easy exit from the booth while maintaining a smile that was probably meant to look friendly, but came across as purely menacing. "Gentlemen, hope you're having a productive discussion about municipal compliance procedures and historical inspection practices," he said while positioning himself to monitor everything we'd spread across the table. "Mr. Briggs, I believe you have some original paperwork that would be very helpful for our current neighborhood assessment project." "Son, you're making a serious mistake here, Walter," said Travis. But his voice was shaky, and I could see genuine fear in his expression as Travis leaned closer. "Walter, you signed those original inspections, which makes you part of this operation. Whether you cooperate willingly or require additional persuasion," Travis whispered just loud enough for both of us to hear, "either you support our compliance program moving forward, or we make sure everyone knows about the corners you cut during your municipal career." The blackmail attempt was clear and immediate. They're trying to force Walter into supporting their fraud by threatening to destroy his professional reputation with fabricated accusations about his past work. I was reaching for my phone to call for help when Clarier Benton walked into the diner, carrying her legal folder and wearing an expression that suggested she'd been expecting to find exactly this situation. "Travis Doyle, you are currently out on bail pending criminal charges and intimidating witnesses constitutes obstruction of justice under state and federal law," she announced loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. Travis immediately stood up and backed away from our booth, probably realizing that threatening an elderly man was manageable, but doing it in front of a retired lawyer was considerably more dangerous for his legal situation. Claire positioned herself between Travis and our table while pulling out her phone, apparently prepared to document any additional criminal behavior. Walter used the distraction to gather his papers and move to a different booth, but I could see that the confrontation had shaken him badly. "If they've marked your house the way they did last night, the board has already decided who leaves next," he warned me while glancing nervously toward the door where Travis was making more phone calls. "This isn't random harassment. Displacement. And once they target a family, they don't stop until that family is gone." And the weight of his words hit me as I realized the vandalism on my garage wasn't just retaliation for me investigation. It was the beginning of an escalation designed to make my life unbearable until I gave up and moved away. If you've received suspicious inspection notices, check the inspector's signatures against state licensing databases. Forgeries are more common than you'd think. The drive home from the diner felt different knowing that I was officially marked for systematic harassment rather than just dealing with random criminal behavior. Travis followed my truck for several miles, maintaining aggressive distance. It was clearly meant to intimidate rather than simply monitor my activities. But when I finally reached my neighborhood, the escalation was waiting for me in my own driveway. Fresh spray paint across my garage door read "safety violator," along with a fake citation number. More disturbing were additional scratches around my garage fire, alarm housing, and deliberate tampering with my electrical meter box. Security camera footage later confirmed Travis had been on my property for over an hour, methodically documenting various systems while I was away gathering ammunition against his criminal organization. Looking at the fresh paint on my garage, I realized they were done being subtle. Wednesday evening, I made a decision that probably sounds crazy looking back, but felt completely logical after 3 days of watching my neighborhood get terrorized by organized criminals pretending to be safety officials. I was going to expose the entire operation live on the internet, broadcasting from my garage with all the materials spread out where anyone could see them. I'd spent hours setting up lighting, using my security floodlights, and positioning camera angles to capture everything clearly, including the vandalized garage door with safety violator painted in red letters. Starting the live stream felt surreal, like stepping into some alternate reality where ordinary warehouse managers become investigative journalists from their own garages. Good evening, I'm Daniel Harris, and I'm broadcasting live from Franklin County to show you an HOA fraud that's been targeting families across multiple states. I began speaking directly to the camera while holding up Travis's business cards and quota sheets. My phone buzzed with thousands of live alerts as viewers started asking questions and sharing their own experiences with suspicious contractors. Within 20 minutes, I had over 2,000 people watching while I methodically presented proof of forged inspection documents and manufactured safety violations. Comments poured across the screen faster than I could read as people across the entry described identical experiences with fake contractors, fraudulent notices, and expensive resolution services. Many viewers shared specific details about their own harassment, creating a real-time database of similar crimes happening nationwide. I was reading some comments out loud when something incredible happened. Someone identifying themselves as FBI Agent Sarah Chen posted a verified message that made my heart race. Mr. Harris, we've been tracking this criminal organization across state lines for 8 months. Your documentation completes our RICO case. I actually had to stop talking and reread that message 3 times before I could believe what was happening. In front of thousands of witnesses, the Federal Bureau of Investigation had been conducting an ongoing investigation into the same fraud network terrorizing my neighborhood. And my live stream was providing the missing proof they needed. Agent Chen continued posting, explaining their investigation had identified similar operations in over 30 communities across 7 states. But they'd lacked direct video footage of actual destruction and intimidation tactics. My recordings provided exactly what prosecutors needed to prove organized criminal enterprise charges. It felt like my garage had become a studio, every second spilling onto screens across the country as thousands of viewers realized they were watching federal law. Enforcement coordination happened in real time. Agent Chen asked me to continue streaming while agents coordinated with local police to execute search warrants. Keep presenting your materials, she posted. Teams are moving on multiple targets simultaneously based on information you've verified. The idea that my amateur research was contributing to coordinated action felt both thrilling and terrifying, but mostly it felt like justice finally operating at the speed ordinary people needed. That's when the live stream took an unexpected turn I definitely hadn't planned for. Instead of Travis appearing, Marcia read herself walk into my driveway with a wireless microphone and prepared talking points, apparently planning to hijack my broadcast with her own version of events. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Marcia Reed, and I'm here to address false accusations being spread about our legitimate community safety organization, she announced while walking directly into my camera frame without permission. My phone buzzed with alerts as viewers realized the main villain had just entered the hero's live stream to defend herself. But Marcia Spreppard's speech quickly fell apart under pressure from my questions and chat comments I was reading aloud. Mrs. Reed, can you explain why your notices cite repealed municipal codes and use forged inspector signatures? I asked while holding up Walter's documentation, which question made her more agitated until she finally snapped. Need guidance about property values and neighborhood character. Sometimes that requires encouraging certain residents to consider whether they're a good cultural fit for the area," she said directly into my camera. "We provide relocation consulting for families who might be happier in areas more suited to their financial capabilities." Comments poured across the screen as viewers recognized the coded, discriminatory language Marcia had just admitted on live television. "You saying you harass families until they move away?" I pressed, and she responded, with exactly the confession prosecutors dream about. "We help communities maintain consistent standards by identifying residents who may not be committed to long-term neighborhood stability," she said, while apparently not realizing thousands were recording her words. Behind me, neighbors shouted, "No more scams," turning the stream into a street rally. Sometimes issues resolve themselves when families make appropriate housing decisions. Every word created more ammunition for the federal case. Neighbors started arriving in my driveway carrying signs they'd mattered during my broadcast, "Had no fake authority," and "Protect our neighborhood" written in marker on poster board. Mrs. Patterson was filming while Jim live streamed to his own followers, exponentially expanding the audience for Marcia's public meltdown. The visual of community members surrounding my garage while supporting my exposure felt like perfect television, except it was completely real and happening in front of thousands of internet witnesses sharing the streams across platforms. Wail of sirens overlapped with Marcia's last sentence. The timing so perfect, it froze her mid-word as she realized what kind of hole she dug with her recorded admissions. This broadcast has been forwarded to investigators who are executing search warrants at multiple HOA offices as we speak, I announced while Marcia's face went pale. Police cars were arriving from multiple directions, apparently summoned by agents monitoring my live stream. She was being arrested while viewers watched warrants executed in real time. Federal justice moves faster than I expected. The federal courthouse in downtown Springfield was nothing like the small-town legal proceedings I'd imagined. When this whole nightmare started, with Travis destroying my windshield last Sunday morning, walking through metal detectors and security checkpoints to testify in a RICO prosecution felt surreal. It's like stepping into a legal thriller where ordinary citizens become key witnesses in cases against organized crime syndicates. The gallery was packed with victims from multiple states who had traveled specifically to see Marcia Reed and her associates faced charges for coordinated fraud that had affected over 300 families across 7 states. Sitting in the witness waiting area with Walter Briggs and Claire Benton, I kept thinking about how one broken windshield had led to dismantling an entire criminal enterprise that had been operating for years. Federal prosecutor Maria Santos walked us through the charges before we testified, explaining how our documentation had provided crucial proof for demonstrating interstate wire fraud, mail fraud, and RSEO violations against what the government was calling a sophisticated criminal organization designed to deliberately defraud homeowners through manufactured compliance crises. The scope of their investigation was staggering. It identified over $2 million in illegal fees collected from targeted communities, along with real estate manipulation schemes that had forced dozens of families to sell their homes at below-market prices to escape harassment. Our local case had become the foundation for a prosecution that would protect countless future victims from similar coordinated abuse. Judge Patricia Williams delivered the sentences with the kind of stern authority that made it clear these weren't just financial crimes, but attacks on the fundamental security that families deserve in their own communities. Marcia Reed received 8 years in prison, complete forfeit of all assets derived from the fraud operation, and lifetime prohibition from any involvement in real estate or community management activities. Her co-conspirators received sentences ranging from 3 to 6 years depending on their level of involvement and cooperation with the investigation. Travis Doyle, despite his live-streamed confession and cooperation with agents, still received 4 years in prison, plus mandatory restitution payments to all identified victims of his intimidation and destruction activities. The judge's statement during sentencing addressed the broader implications of coordinated HOA abuse and the need for national scrutiny to protect homeowners from organized exploitation. This criminal enterprise deliberately targeted vulnerable communities and exploited legitimate homeowner concerns about safety and neighborhood standards. Judge Williams explained while reviewing the comprehensive materials we'd helped provide. These laws exist specifically to prosecute organized schemes that cross state boundaries and prey upon citizens who lack resources to defend themselves against sophisticated fraud operations. Her words felt like vindication for every family who had suffered through months of harassment and financial pressure from criminals pretending to represent community interests. But the most satisfying aspect of the resolution was the comprehensive protection it provided for future potential victims. All HOAs with consulting contracts were subject to immediate audit to identify additional fraud operations before they could target new communities. A hotline was established specifically for reporting suspicious harassment with dedicated agents trained to recognize the patterns would help document through our investigation. Congressional hearings were scheduled to address broader HOA oversight reform, seeking to exploit homeowner vulnerabilities for profit. The financial restitution exceeded anything I'd hoped for when this started with damage to my car. Asset forfeit from the criminal organization created a victim compensation fund that covered all documented losses plus interest and penalties, meaning every family who had paid fraudulent fees received full recovery along with additional compensation for emotional distress and lost time. My windshield replacement was obviously the smallest item in the restitution calculations, but receiving that check felt symbolic of a system that actually worked to protect ordinary people when they had sufficient proof and legal support to pursue justice through appropriate channels. 6 months after the prosecution concluded, our neighborhood looked completely different, in ways that went far beyond my new windshield and freshly painted garage door. The community had formed an authentic homeowner association focused on actual neighborhood improvement rather than manufactured crises, with Claire serving as president and Walter providing technical consultation on real safety issues that occasionally needed attention. Home values had stabilized after the artificial manipulation ended, and families who had been considering moving away decided to stay now that they felt secure in their own residences. The stress and anxiety that had been building throughout our community during months of coordinated harassment was replaced by genuine cooperation and mutual support between neighbors. The national impact surprised everyone involved in the case. Congressional testimony led to legislation requiring transparency for all CHOA operations, with criminal penalties for organizations that manufacture violations or intimidate homeowners. Through fake authority claims, multiple states rolled out reforms ensuring neighborhoods could never again be hijacked by fake compliance rackets. And agencies developed training programs to help local police identify and respond to organized HOA fraud before it could escalate to coordinated community exploitation. Media coverage sparked nationwide conversations about resident safeguards and the need for accountability in community management organizations. Standing in my driveway, washing my replacement car, same make and model as the one Travis had destroyed. But somehow, it felt different, knowing it was protected by new laws and community solidarity. I thought about how ordinary people can achieve extraordinary justice when they document everything, build strategic alliances, and refuse to be intimidated by criminals with fake authority. Travis had been right about one thing when he smashed my windshield that Sunday morning. He didn't expect what happened next.
Ow.
None of us did. Sometimes individual courage becomes community protection, and community protection becomes national reform. All because someone decided to fight back against coordinated abuse instead of paying fraudulent fees or moving away to escape harassment. So now my garage is organized again, my neighborhood is safe again, and whole communities are breathing easier because we refuse to bow to fake authority. Maybe the real lesson here is that fear only works until someone says enough. If you're still here, drop a comment and tell me what you think. Would you have stood your ground? Hit like, subscribe, and if you want to support the channel, that little thanks button below means the world. Stay sharp. Stay steady, friends. Scories is all about the wildest things real people go through, and we're just getting started. Like, share, and stay tuned for more madness.